Our speaker is the Learning Lead, Senior Researcher, and Innovation Specialist at Learnovate Centre in Ireland. She brings 15 years of industry experience from various roles with organizations such as the Coca-Cola Company, Abbott Diagnostics, and Lionbridge Technologies. Joining us all the way from Ireland, please welcome Ms. Janet Benson. Good morning to you, Janet.
Good morning and good afternoon to all of you guys. It's early here now in the northwest of Ireland, but it's sunny. It's a good start to the day, Elle. So it's lovely to see you all this morning.
Lovely to have you. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my slides then. So I'm hoping
All right.
brilliant. Okay, thank you, Elle. So good morning. Lovely to be here, and thanks so much for having me. As the lovely introduction said, my name is Janet Benson, and I work at the Learnovate Centre, which is an education technology research centre based out of Trinity College in Dublin. So today, my focus is going to be very much on the future of learning and what we're seeing in regard to technology and learning. And what I'm going to do briefly, I suppose, as a starting point, is look at, okay, well, what is the immediate future looking like? What are the things that are happening now in relation to the current situation? Look briefly at digital transformation, and I know everyone's been listening to a lot in the last few days and weeks over the conference about what digital transformation means. So I'll focus very much on what digital transformation means for learning. Talk briefly about what that means in a really practical sense in relation to how do we implement best practice in relation to learning and technology, and especially in relation to collaborative learning, because what we're seeing, of course, is that people are feeling quite isolated at the moment. There's a lot of people obviously working from home, and how do we encourage a level of collaboration when we're looking at people working? And then, if I have time, so very briefly, I'd like to talk about a current research project that we're doing at the Centre at Learnovate, which is looking at remote onboarding. So how do we onboard or induct people to a new role remotely, especially if they're going to continue to work from home? So there's a lot to cover. I will share my slides, obviously, afterwards if anyone's interested. So what I'll do is I'll get through as much as I can now in the 15 minutes that I have. And again, happy to open up the floor to any questions or to share any slides. So, I mean, what we're looking at here is the immediate future, right, for now. And these are just some statistics, most of them actually from Ireland. But, what we're seeing is that people have, been working from home. They've been working in a hybrid kind of way in the very recently, and seeing, well, there's been an absolute change in how people look at work and how they look at their life and the work-life balance and how the balance has shifted. And really what we're seeing is that a lot more people would like to continue this hybrid way of working, and hopefully, continue to work into the future. In that more hybrid way, and having more time and less commuting and all that kind of stuff. And I won't go through what those statistics say, but I think what we're seeing is, there's definitely a lot more use of technology in learning. And that can be anywhere from, when we're looking at the initial processes, when we look at onboarding, when we look at recruiting people into an organization, the automation of the use of AI for those sorts of processes, the whole way through to personalization of learning. So we're looking at machine learning, and we're looking at, personalizing the learning experience for people. Because again, adult learners are very selective. They understand, what they need from their own learning experience, and technology can definitely support that and try to provide them with a more personalized learning experience. And I think what Oliver was saying earlier, exploiting versus exploring technology really fits here. It's like, how does the technology support what we're trying to do, what we're trying to do with the learning outcomes? So again, what I want to do briefly is talk about, what does digital transformation mean for learning? And when we talk about digital transformation, we're looking at the fourth industrial revolution, which I think is a really nice way to look at it. There won't be a test on what the other three uh, industrial revolutions were, but if anyone wants to think about them and share them in the chat, that'll be really nice. So I think the main point being that digital transformation is that strategic adoption of digital technologies. And I think the word strategy there is very important. I think we need to look at it from a very much a strategic standpoint, and that we're not, and I guess what we've seen, I suppose, in the last, say, 18 months is that a lot of organizations are trying to be quite, reactive and implementing digital for learning in particular, in a very ad hoc kind of way. And I think that can be quite, while we had to do it in the last 18 months, I think, what organizations are doing now is taking that step back and looking to see how do we be more strategic in the adoption of technology, particularly for learning. So But I think the important points to note are, there's some real opportunities here when we look at digital transformation of learning, improving processes and productivity. And again, that goes across the board, not just for learning, but again, it's about delivering better learning experiences for learners, scaling those solutions. So, reaching anyone anywhere is really the thing that we're trying to do at the moment, especially when we have so many people working from home and working remotely. So the opportunities really are, flexibility. We know when it comes to online learning that it's a lot more flexible. It offers learners a lot more flexibility, but not just learners. I mean, the people who are providing learning as well. It offers them a level of flexibility in regard to the experience. Again, scalability. We know it's easier to scale learning solutions when we're looking at kind of that remote or online world. Learning management is obviously something that we can look at, when we look at learning management systems, for example, there's a lot of management there, especially when it comes to corporate learning and development, where you need to ensure that learning has been completed. So that's obviously an opportunity for us. And I think a really important one to call out really is that learner autonomy or active learning. So when we look at learning, it's not a didactic experience. It shouldn't be anyway. The learner shouldn't be sort of the last sort of thing that we think about when we think about learning. The learner really should be at the center of the learning experience. And it's not about delivery of training, it's about the experience of the learner. And giving learners that level of autonomy or control over their own learning experience is really nicely facilitated through technology. So again, when I look at AI and look at personalization, it gives learners that control over their own experience, which when we look at adult learners and adult learning theory is really, really important. And again, it's about putting, the learners in an active situation where they're not passively just taking in information, that they're an active participant in their own learning experience. And again, the technology can really support that. I've mentioned personalized learning already, but I think it's about encouraging learners to be more independent and to bring in that level of collaboration. So again, that I think that's extremely important at the moment when we're looking at people who are potentially isolated, potentially working remotely. How do we get people to collaborate? And I'm going to talk about that in a couple of slides, just to talk about how we can kind of facilitate that more collaborative online experience, which I think is so important for connection and for getting people to interact with each other, especially again, as I say, in the current situation. So some of the challenges that we see are, some of these things like reluctance to change. This is going to happen in any kind of situation, not just in relation to learning, but I think in relation to often adoption of technology or any kind of change management. There'll always be technical challenges that we have to overcome. But engagement and motivation are definitely the ones that we are seeing, especially at the Learnovate Centre. We've been talking to, obviously, we have clients and members in lots of different industries, but also in schools and in higher education. And engagement and motivation are those challenges that we're seeing, coming up again and again. And how do we encourage people to engage? How do we motivate people to learn in this online space? And again, there's lots of different ways that we can do that. And I'll talk about that a little bit, and some of the best practices about how we do that. Equity issues definitely is something that has definitely come to the fore in the last 18 months. And again, AI can help with identifying some of those equity issues. Like, how do we identify who are the at-risk learners, who are the people who perhaps don't have access to the right technology to engage with their learning experience. And I think these are things that we can all kind of identify with and understand. If you've got kids at home, for example, at the moment who are learning at home, or you've got college students, there's going to be a level of sort of equity issue there, even in the home, when there's a lot of different people trying to access lots of different technology and Wi-Fi, for example. We're definitely seeing a lot of that in Ireland. So I hope I'm not talking too fast, by the way. It's definitely an Irish thing, so you can tell me if I need to slow down. But hopefully you can always watch the recording afterwards. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the best practices when we're digitally transforming learning. Um, and I think again, I kind of what Lou was saying earlier. It's often about a couple of things and then the technology. And I think that's something again that we definitely we feel very strongly about at Learnovate, that we start with the problem, we start with the learning, we start with the pedagogy, and then we look at the technology. And again, I think what's happened with organizations in the last 18 months or so is often that it's very solution orientated, it's very solution first, and it's often, well, we've got this technology, we've got a learning management system, we've got particular tools and technologies that we use. Let's shoehorn our learning into those technologies, rather than, okay, now is the time to take a step back and say, well, what's the problem? What's the learning outcome that we're trying to solve? What's the learning problem that we're trying to solve? And then we'll let the technology kind of, guide us in that direction, or sit on top of that learning problem. again, I think it's important to focus on the learner. Like, what do the learners need? Really understanding your learner is something that's really important when it comes to a really effective and engaging learning experience. And again, it's something that we do at Learnovate. We do a lot of, as I'm part of, the innovation services team, looking at who is your learner, what is the persona of your learner, and how do we address their specific needs, their barriers, their motivations with the learning experience that will work for them. So I think that's really important. I put in here, don't put your face-to-face content online, because I think that's what's kind of been happening. And I don't even mean in the last, when we're being quite reactive in the last 18 months. I think that happens quite a lot, in that organizations take, their PowerPoint presentations, for example, pop them into the learning management system, and that's learning. That's the learning done. And that's definitely not how we want to approach a learning experience. So that's just delivery of content, really. It's not actually learning. So I think that's something that we have to be aware of, that, when we're looking at digital learning or online learning or dealing with remote workers, that it's a completely different experience, and we have to be more strategic in how we adapt those technologies and how we adapt those experiences. I could talk about micro learning, I could talk about gamification, I could talk about all the things all day, but it's very important to kind of mix up your delivery. Try to kind of engage your learners, bring them into the experience. Again, when I talk about active learning, it's very much bringing the learner into the experience and not having them sort of sit at a computer and read lots of information. Um, and again, it's about setting expectations as well. I think sometimes we assume that our learners have a level of sort of, ability when it comes to technology a lot of the time, or an automatic understanding. And I know there's that term digital natives, or, but even, people who are quite au fait with technology in particular areas of their work or their life. We can't assume, though, that they will automatically understand the technology that we want them to use for learning. So it's very important to make sure that people are feeling confident in using the technology before they even engage with the learning experience. And I think it's important to set those expectations and understand, where people are at with regard to technology. And again, reflection is something, again, that I could spend a whole session on, but I think it's very important to think about how, the learning experience, how it's not just delivery of information, that allow your learners to have a period where they think about what they've learned, and maybe set them some reflection type activities whereby they have a chance to think about their learning and how they'll apply their learning in a real world setting. So again, for adult learners, that's really important. How does it apply to my real life? How do I ensure that the learning is something that I can, apply to a real world setting, even outside of work? So I think that's something that, reflection allows us to do that. And a reflection is a really good way to improve a learning experience. Um, so again, in relation to collaboration, another thing that I'm very excited about. I feel very passionately about collaboration, especially in a learning situation, and it's a key factor in that active learning and building a community. So we want people to interact with each other. It's very hard to build communities, as I'm sure a lot of you have been seeing in relation to, when you've got people working remotely. Build that community, bring the culture of your organization into the online space, and ensuring some kind of collaborative learning, collaborative activities and interaction really helps with that. And there are definitely a lot of best practices in how we kind of build that community of practice, as it's called, or a community of learners working together. There's lots of best practice. I mean, again, I don't have a huge amount of time to talk through this, but I think it's important to focus on particular tasks that look at problem solving, critical thinking, and then varying different tasks with people, so that they don't feel like this is just a tick box exercise for us, that we have to be collaborative, that we're actually, setting people tasks that allow them to be collaborative. Um, so there's obviously lots of different ways to do that. And again, I won't go through this in a huge amount of detail, but I think it's good to just mix it up, keep things fresh, assign roles to people, so that again you don't have people who become lurkers, or tend to kind of not engage in a collaborative experience. So I think there's lots of best practice in relation to that. It's about making sure that everyone feels part of the experience. And there's a lot of technology out there at the moment that I'm sure everyone is using. In relation to how you can use breakout rooms, for example, in Zoom or MS Teams, to kind of get people in smaller groups and then maybe present back to a wider team. All of these things really help to kind of get people collaborating. And again, it's about the problem first, and the technology and the tools should definitely come last. Here's just examples of tools that everyone's using all the time. Look at your learning management system if you're an organization that has a learning management system, and see, well, what can our learning management system do, and what can it not do in particular, and then what other tools can we use to kind of complement the learning experience for our learners. So from things like wikis to social media to WhatsApp, there's lots of tools out there that we can definitely avail of and see what they can do for you. And what I always say say, I've been saying this, I guess, in the last 18 months, is look at the tools that you're using, not even for learning. Are there tools that you're using for other things? So are you using tools outside of even work to engage with your family or your friends or whatever? And how might those tools then help you with the learning experience? I think looking at those kinds of things and how you can translate the technology into different experiences is a really nice way of looking at, I guess, as Oliver was saying earlier, exploring the technology. So we work on a lot of different types of projects at Learnovate, and one we're looking at the moment, and we had been looking at even before the pandemic, is how do we provide a really effective and engaging remote onboarding experience? Because we're aware that people, even if they're not going to work remotely indefinitely, that a lot of people have a remote onboarding experience before they even come into an office environment. And how do we provide an experience to new employees that's really engaging? Because we know that the statistics are there to say if people have, say, for example, a poor onboarding experience, that it does lead to people sort of thinking not that great about a company and potentially thinking about leaving. So there's lots of statistics out there that I could share, but really what we're trying to do is look at, okay, what are the positives of providing a really good onboarding experience? And what we started with this particular project was looking at, what's the state of the market, what's happening at the moment in relation to onboarding, and how do we kind of, I guess, leverage the things that are working really well, either in a remote situation or even in face-to-face situation, and how do we translate them to the online space? So what we kind of found was, like, there's a lot of focus really on the push, is what I'm calling it. What the information is that the company wants to impart or push onto a new employee or a new learner, and it's often not about what does the new employee need. Like, think about, again, it's kind of a focus on the new employee and a focus on the new learner. What does that person need? And think about, what do they need to be able to pull from the organization is one thing. And we also found that it's very much a one size fits all. And I think that's a key thing when it comes to onboarding. We have people who are, coming as graduates, straight out of university, for example, and then we might have people come into an organization who've worked in another organization for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're getting the same onboarding experience. And that definitely falls down when it comes to, addressing particular needs. And again, when we think about AI and technology, this can help to personalize that onboarding experience. And that's something that we're looking at the moment at Learnovate and developing out the solution to this particular problem. Sometimes you have a buddy or a kind of a mentor in an organization, which can often be sort of ad hoc, again, when you're working in the workplace. But this has to be like front and center and thought about in a strategic way when it comes to remote onboarding. Who is that buddy or mentor that's set up for a new employee, and what's expected of that person, and what that interaction is going to look like? Huge element at the moment, and I know I'm running out of time here as well. I know Elle will probably tell me that I'm running out of time, but the social aspect of onboarding, and again, the social aspect of learning, but the social aspect of work at the moment is something that we have to really be aware of, that people are missing out on that social element of interacting with each other, those water cooler moments. I hate that term, but even just going out for lunch, the social interactions with each other in the workplace are missing. And it's something that we really need to facilitate in a more explicit way in the online space, and it can often be missing from an onboarding experience as well. So again, when you're onboarding somebody remotely, you need to facilitate these kinds of interactions and not make it feel particularly forced. And I think, when it comes to assignments, we do assignments a lot of the time, and I'm sure you're all aware, that it's a good way to sort of get someone up and running, give them an assignment or a project to do. But sometimes if the assignment doesn't feel relevant, it kind of echoes the whole learning experience and relevance to a person. If it doesn't feel relevant and it feels a little bit pointless, and it feels like it's, a kind of a one size fits all approach that everyone's getting the same project to do, then people tend to switch off again. So we don't want people to disengage right from the off when we look at, a learning experience or an onboarding experience. And again, setting expectations is something that I can't really iterate. Like, I can reiterate it like all day long, because I just think that often we assume as an organization that people understand what's expected of them. And if we don't actually set those expectations or timelines, or, ensure that people understand what is expected of them, then how will they know? So again, that's where we are with the project. I see Elle is there. What we're doing is, with this project at the moment, is we're heading towards that sort of design, implementation, prototyping phase of the project, and addressing some of those problems that we're seeing in the onboarding space. So yeah, I think I just got there, Elle. I know I went a little bit over, and I probably went really fast, but there was so much I wanted to talk about this morning, so I hope I didn't go too fast.
Thank you so much, Jen. I gathered so many useful nuggets from your sharing. So thank you so much.